Today's webinar is inventory reduction. Let's bring it into balance. What we're going to do today is discuss opportunities to balance inventory by showing the importance of establishing a baseline, targets, and goals, explore activities involved in balancing inventory, minimizing inventory working capital, leading to hopefully maximizing profits, and discuss operational, tactical, and strategic inventory reduction opportunities. Now, as supply chain professionals, we need to be concerned with how inventory impacts resources, productivity, customer service, profitability, and operational efficiency. So it's very important to realize the ability to properly manage inventory is directly linked to a company's profitability. Now, companies keep inventory for many reasons. Some reasons are good and some not so good. A few good reasons might be to gain a competitive advantage, improve customer service, maintain spare parts for service, gain flexibility in production scheduling. How about being prepared for supply chain disruptions caused by the coronavirus? I think we're all going through that today. And we'll also discuss some reasons why, some poor reasons. Now, as a consultant, I was often asked by management to determine if their inventory balancing project was successful. They often felt that expected benefits were not being achieved. I would usually ask a few general questions, such as, what was the baseline, the starting point, what was the target, what was the time frame, where are you today? And when I used to find what management quite often couldn't answer these questions, they never identified a starting point, where they wanted to go, how long it would take. In reality, this lack of information made it impossible to determine if the project was going to be a success. If you desire to be successful, take a few minutes to answer these type of questions. If you do it, it'll let everybody know if the company succeeded in the future. So if we look at some metrics, what we're going to talk about, a company has a goal to turn about 6 times a year. They're only doing it 3.6. They want to reduce inventory by 10%. They want to improve inventory accuracy. They want to reduce the cost of goods. All of these metrics are very easy to determine. It should all be available. But for some reason, they don't like to write it down, and they don't like to say where they want to go. About the only metric up here that might be difficult to find would be safety stock dollars. Quite frankly, nobody has any idea what the cost is for those. Now, during this presentation, we're going to be discussing a number of methods to balance inventory, to better manage supply and demand, as shown on this visual. So let's begin by looking at management expectations. If you look at plan and source, make, deliver, I'm just using 20 days for each for a total of 60 days. Now this would equate to being 6.1 turns, approximately 100 and some odd days of inventory. However, what's planned doesn't always reflect reality. Let's see what the company is really doing with inventory. So before we turn the page, does everybody know what management wants as far as raw material, as far as work in process, and as far as finished goods? As how many days of inventory do they want to keep? If I look at a company's financials, the balance sheet's going to tell us that the company currently has inventory of $10,000, turns of 3.6, or 101 days. That sounds like a lot of inventory. The income statement tells us COGS is equal to 80% of sales. That sounds kind of high. Operating income, while positive, is still low for this industry. Management is saying they want to reduce inventory by 10%. So as I showed a moment ago, from $10,000 down to $9,000. If this occurs, assets will go down, profits will go up, cost of goods should also go down. Now let's take a more detailed look to see why inventory is so high. If we go to the balance sheet, we can determine the number of days of inventory for each category. We're looking at the inventory value. We can figure out the percent. So finished goods is 48.4% of the $10,000. And we can also figure out the number of days of inventory. So 48% of 101 days is approximately 49 days. You'll notice that raw material and finished goods are out of bounds with management expectations of 20 days each. So the question is, why? So what are we going to do? We're going to begin to find out why by running a simple ABC or Pareto analysis to help segment the inventory. We're going to use inventory on hand for this ABC because this will tell us where the inventory actually is. Also, when I normally do this type of report, I like to expand it to show things like days supply, maybe seasonal items, and then later I'll also figure out what is slow moving and obsolete. So let's begin by looking at slow moving and obsolete. In our particular case, 17% of the inventory is currently classified as slow moving and obsolete. Within your company, do you know how much inventory is slow moving and obsolete? The way that we're going to define it, slow moving is more than any inventory in excess of 18 months. Obsolete has no prior usage or projected future usage. Now, if you have any obsolete inventory, it has to be immediately written off according to general accepted accounting principles. If you have slow moving inventory, you normally have to establish a reserve, which means you're going to be writing off some of the inventory and your cost of goods are going to take a hit. Another thing to realize that it's very difficult to reduce obsolete and slow moving unless you take some sort of action to reduce it. So one of the first things we want to do is look at slow moving and obsolete and say, how can we remove it? Now, perhaps you can take some of that inventory, return it to the vendor and get credit. In some cases, you can take inventory and rework it. For example, you might have, let's say, a 10-foot piece of piping. You could cut it into thirds because you're using 3-foot pieces. And if you do that, you've now recovered most of that inventory cost. Obviously, you could try to sell it. And if you talk to some of your customers, they might take the old inventory at full price, or you might have to discount it. And there's always the ability to donate it. So we want to reduce the slow moving and obsolete from $1,700 down to $500. So our goal is to recover at least $1,200. The more of this we do, it will then have a positive impact on COGS and profits. It's going to free up quite a bit of cash for other activities. So let's take a look at days supply. If we do the Pareto analysis, we can identify where the inventory is. So what we want to do is start rebalancing the raw material, because this was the category that exceeded management expectations by the most. Now, if we just take a few of the A items, and if we can eliminate that, we will immediately drop the percentage. So you don't have to look at every single item of inventory. You want to focus on those top A items. So perhaps I can do a vendor managed inventory program. So if we can take inventory and allow our suppliers to maintain it and it's on their book, well, we've reduced it quite a bit. So we can try vendor managed, we can try vendor owned inventory or consignment, or even establish a just-in-time program to bring in what we need of A items each week. Doing any one of these three would almost immediately reduce our inventories by quite a bit. And also remember, this is an iterative process. You do one or two items, you take corrective action, then you take the next two and the next two, and you keep on doing that. And you periodically rerun your ABC to reclassify the top items, and then you work on those. Now, let's take a look to see why inventory may be out of bounds. Management often wants to retain inventory for many different reasons. And what you can see here, we like to call it by many different names. But inventory by any name is still just inventory. Inventory is going to increase assets. It's going to increase COGS. It's going to lower our inventory turns. So why are we keeping it? Now, one thing you have to realize, when we're starting off with our inventory of $10,000, we said $1,700 was slow moving, and perhaps another $800 is for inventory buildup. So just think, right now, a lot of your companies may be building up inventory for seasonality. Maybe it's part of the coronavirus buildup. Maybe it's a new part. You need to try to track that inventory, because if you're trying to reduce it, and management has said they want $800 worth of inventory for any of these particular categories, it becomes extremely difficult to reduce the total inventory when you're taking out dollars. So rather than having a 10% reduction of $10,000, we're looking at a 10% reduction of probably $7,500, because $1,800 was slow moving, $700 was inventory buildup. We need to track this added inventory. We have a tendency to want to buy the inventory, but guess what happens in another year or 2 years? We forget to reduce it. And a lot of this inventory buildup becomes future slow moving and obsolete. So be very careful about this. But wait, there are also other forms of inventory being built up. Let's take a look. Quite often, these type of hidden forms of inventory are not really noticed by management. These factors contribute to the buildup. So think about some of them. Does your company bring in inventory early? Do you have scrap and yield factors where you're buying additional inventory that you may or may not need? We're going to talk about lead times. When was the last time you reviewed your lead times? You may have high utilization efficiency factors, which is saying that you need additional material. Or do you bring in supplier deliveries early? Do you allow overage? And then things like inflated forecast, production plans, and MPS, does that occur in your company? If you're not careful, each one of these should be bringing in that inventory early. It's causing an inventory buildup. Also, we like to store inventory everywhere. And when we store in all these locations, is it considered to be an asset, an expense, or just not even known? So let's just talk about a couple of these for the moment and see why they may cause inventory to go out of bounds. We talked about obsolete. Return to vendor. Do you have inventory that's been rejected by a supplier? By your quality control group? Is it sitting in your receiving area? Is it sitting in a review area? It may be on your books. And even worse, because it's on your books, you may not be ordering it. Or even worse, because you think it's rejected, you order even more inventory to replace that. That's building it up. Rejected parts. How long do they stay rejected? So if you're building a unit and it's not good, is it considered to be rework, or is it considered still to be active production? And in some cases, you might be taking rejected parts, throwing them under the bench and rebuilding them, but inventory has been built up. So we're going to look at a couple, and let's take a look about how delivery schedule may impact inventory. If you look at option 1, observe how deliveries are heaviest during the last week of the month. So if you look at period 4, you'll see it says 150 in both cases. If I compute my average inventory at month end, it's 150 plus 150 is 300 divided by 2. That says my average inventory is 150. If I look at option 2, I've made a little change here. I'm not having the heaviest deliveries occur in the last week of the month. They're now coming in at the first week of the month. So at month end, my inventory is 50. So in week 4, it's 50. In week 4, it's 50. So my average inventory for the month is now 50. What have I just done? A simple change for this item reduced my total inventory from 150 to 50, a savings of $100 without any loss of customer service. Take a look at some of your A items. How are they coming in? Are you normally bringing them in at month end to build the inventory up for the following month? If you are, ask yourself why. A simple change can reduce your inventory by quite a bit. Another hidden way to build up inventory is to purchase or make a quantity that exceeds what was ordered, or permit rejected inventory to remain in-house. Why not inform everyone that overages are no longer going to be accepted? And if it does come in, it'll be promptly returned. So think about what's happening with your deliveries. Yes, your terms and conditions say you may accept plus 10%, but ask why. Change those terms and conditions so it's 0% under, 0% over. If I need 100, I want to receive 100. That doesn't mean 98, and it definitely doesn't mean 110. Get your suppliers to give you what you want. Just think, this could be accounting for 5% increase in your inventory. The other potential problem, since you didn't need some of this material that came in as an overage, that may be a future slow-moving and obsolete item. And as far as any rejected material, get it returned or fixed immediately. Don't let it sit around. Let's take a look at lead times. If I look at my production lead time and my purchasing processing time, that's the time it's going to take from when I start planning the item, place the order, have it made or be in transit, receive it, put it, inspect it, and put it away. It's important to understand the time assigned to each activity to figure out what, if any of these elements can be reduced. For example, what if your system permits each element to show an inflated factor of an extra day or two? Do you know the value of 1 day's worth of inventory? If I can reduce 1 day's worth of inventory for everything, how much is that going to save me? How about for 5 days, 10 days? So why not establish a program to better manage A items lead time to make sure if you've implemented a just-in-time program that the lead time in your system is 1 day and not maybe 5 or 10 days. Our next area is going to be safety stock. Now, safety stock is often what I would call a black hole. Inventory seems to go in it. It never seems to come out. We also think that safety stock provides a layer of production. However, we have no idea in many cases the quantity, the reason that we're keeping it, or the value. So it's going to be important to figure out the items and the dollar value. When was the last time you did an analysis of your safety stock to figure out how much do you have? Now, if you're keeping it because of poor delivery performance, quality issues, inventory accuracy, maybe those are reasons to take a look at the process and see what can we do to improve it. Now, as far as things like customer service level for finished goods, we're going to take a look at that in a moment. But here again, great opportunity to find ways to reduce how much inventory do we have. Now, management needs to establish a desired service level for finished goods. In your company, what is your goal? Is it 99%, 98%, 95%? Is every item treated the same? Take a look at this visual. Do you notice the financial impact of a service level decision? Do you notice the difference in quantity and value between the different levels? So if I go from 99% down to 97%, how much am I reducing? That's $200 in this case, or $200,000. I'm reducing my overall inventory from 45,000 down to 37,000. That's quite a difference. So what is your company at? How about if we go from 99% to 95%? You can see the savings. Now, if I have a make-to-stock item with a stable forecast, I'm producing it weekly, there are no quality issues, Why do I need to carry a high level of safety stock? So if I'm currently showing it at 98%, perhaps I could reduce that to 95%. And that's about a 20% reduction in inventory if all my items were made to stock. So consider which items are made to stock, which are stable, and start reducing the service level. Now, I may have items or some items with high demand variability, frequent delivery issues, or that are very critical to a customer. I might want to change that from 97% to 99%. If you're trying to balance your inventory, that means some items are going to go down and some items are going to go up. Here's a perfect example. If I can go through and change some of my percentages, then consider running some sort of simulation program to identify items and determine the dollar impact. If it's sufficient to meet your needs, then why not implement the program and see the savings? Like I said, this is a great area for improvements if you have a lot of finished goods. And if you remember our example, our finished goods was almost double what management expected. So let's go after some of these items. Another area to watch out for is work order staging. Within your company, do you pull work orders early? In some cases, I've seen companies pull them anywhere from a week to 4 to 6 weeks early, and they try to do that to identify shortages, and all they're doing is creating more shortages. They're causing additional inventory to be brought in early. It's impacting the efficiency of the shop because people can't find inventory. So what they do is they borrow from other work orders. And usually when they borrow, they never bother to do a transaction, causing other shortages. The best thing to do is take all these staged orders, return everything to the stock room, and you'll be amazed about how much inventory you will find. And then when you start doing it, only pull a work order when it's ready to be worked on, not anytime sooner. Within your company, do you have any past due work orders? And I'm not talking about a day or two, I'm talking a week, maybe a month, maybe even multiple months. Go out there, close out these old work orders, close out old purchase orders, because what they're doing, they're causing the system to place or delay orders when they can't find anything. And in many cases, you're building up additional orders because you can't find it. So if you have a work order that's, let's say, a month or two past due, it's incomplete, start returning it to stock. Which gets into work in process cleanup. This is another, what I would call a black hole, where inventory seems to go, some cases, to the shop floor, never to be seen again. They say they can't find the inventory. They grab additional inventory out of the stock room. There again, sometimes with paperwork, sometimes without, but it's causing orders to get placed for additional inventory. When was the last time you went through the production area and did a cleanup, looking under the benches, on the racks, in closets, getting all that excess inventory returned, or inventory they can't account for anymore, closing out the old orders? So return everything that's not needed, dispose of scrap. And by the way, if material's to be scrapped and you don't scrap it, it still shows in inventory. So it's important to process that to get rid of it. get the rejected items sent to QC for inspection to determine what type of action should be taken so we can take action to reduce those. So, some final thoughts about inventory reduction. The goal of this webinar was to discuss a few reasons why inventory isn't balanced or how to reduce it. This included things like thinking one less, which means one less piece of safety stock, one less day of lead time, reduce order quantity by 1 day, obviously reducing safety stock. How about training and educating the workforce on the importance of inventory activity, inventory accuracy? How about tracking metrics and targets to know where you are, eliminating slow moving and obsolete, taking a good hard look at days supply, especially the A items, and going after them to reduce a few of those A items, and obviously gaining management approval. So you don't want to delay, you really want to start today to make some of these improvements. By the way, how many of you know what trypophobia is? If you're not familiar with that term, it's fear of change. Companies don't like to change. They want to have a lot of inventory. So management can't have it both ways. They can't say increase inventory and reduce inventory the same day. They have to think about where they want to go. And since this is not a short-term effort, it's an ongoing effort. You're constantly looking at it. You have to measure it. And if management says they're not willing to reduce inventory, it's not going to happen. So if they give mixed signals, and what I mean by a mixed signal, they tell you to reduce the inventory, and the first time you run out of stock, they ask you why you don't have that item. What are you going to do? You're going to bring in more inventory. So I hope I covered and gave you some ideas about how to balance your inventory. Are there any questions that we may have? John,
feel free to unmute folks if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, I see there's 8 different comments out there. If you can tell me what they are.
Yeah, let me see. Well, some of it is just salutations, but let's see. Hank Barr made the comment, the scale in the kitchen is far more important than the scale in the bathroom.
Okay.
I'll buy that. Authorizing a queue, see this is Hank also, authorizing a queue in front of a resource when it's not needed to support flow is a waste. I think we agree on that.
Well, except for the fact, if management calls it a strategic buffer, is it needed? And only management can decide that. And in many cases, they've said, build up inventory. I mean, think of your company today. How much inventory have you brought in early because of supply chain disruptions or inventory coming from overseas, or because your demand is skyrocketing and you want to make sure you have extra inventory? So I'm not sure what management is thinking today about how much inventory and where they should keep it. It's been changing literally from day to day and week to week recently.
Well, you know, given the COVID, I'm wondering if this is really screwing up the folks working in planning.
Definitely. I mean, think about it. Just-in-time deliveries for a lot of companies have went out the window. If they're not bringing it in early, they may run out. And if they can't get a trucker to deliver, or if the ship can't get unloaded, like was going on in California, where it was taking 40 days, let's say, to unload a ship, they need to bring in extra inventory again.
Yeah, this is Rick.
Go ahead.
I can add on to that. I just recently left the medical device industry. I've come back to fast moving consumer goods. But yeah, I mean, COVID has done nothing but wreak havoc in the supply chain end to end. You know, further upstream you go to the suppliers and the tiered suppliers, all the way downstream through the shop floor and the work cells, production lines, even the finished goods, warehousing and distribution. You know, essentially a lot of leaders that have other backgrounds in finance and sales believe that the solution simply is order up, order more, get your POs out there sooner. And in doing that, and everybody's doing that, we've essentially artificially created additional global constraints in the supply chain because we only need a certain percentage of what we're actually asking for. You know, we see that now with container shortages. We see it with extended lead times, boats having to anchor offshore idle as they wait to get unloaded. You know, so there's this many other different obstacles that we're dealing with. And a lot of leadership, again, that doesn't necessarily have supply chain backgrounds or foundationally grounded, are still pushing the order up more because, hey, if we want to have 10 on hand, well, if we order 10 right now, then that's going to eliminate the problem, but it just exacerbates it. That's the experience that I've had over the past almost 2 years now.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. You're seeing the bullwhip effect coming in, but they don't call it, they just call it supply chain disruptions. And think about it, how many of you have probably a year or two of toilet tissue in your house because you wanted to stock up, you were afraid of a shortage. And now think about what companies are doing to build up inventory just in case.
It probably also raises the obsolescence of some of the components.
But like I said, the interesting thing is, and hopefully the coronavirus is on its way out or will be in a few months, what's going to happen to all this inventory that's been brought in? And how many of your companies have placed orders with multiple suppliers for the same thing? And you may start to see orders get canceled. You may be impacted by that. Your suppliers are definitely going to get impacted by it.
Got another, let's see, Karen Giesemann. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. We want to, you want to go ahead and read your question?
Yeah, I can just explain it. So what we're trying to do is work on some cost savings initiatives, and we identified an opportunity with like buffer inventory, and we were trying to financially capture the savings from reducing, you know, from whatever 10 pieces to 5 pieces, which is fairly straightforward, right? 5 pieces, they each cost us much. Yep, we got it. But we were getting some resistance from like our financial group saying that you haven't actually eliminated that cost because although it's not in buffer inventory, it's still in raw material, you know, in the warehouse or wherever. So like what other ways can we capture the savings that we would see from not producing raw into this buffer and having all of this inventory like in process?
You're saying you were building up inventory and moving it into different stages, and you're trying to take the savings by backing it up so you haven't applied labor or material to some of it?
Yeah, I mean, we get more momentum on projects where we can show cost reductions for the company. So how can we help the business see the financial savings that we get from reducing buffer inventory? if it's perceived that you're not really eliminating it if you don't take it all the way back and get it out completely from your factory.
Well, here again, it's up to the financial group to define how they want to do it. But if you're showing a reduction of work in process and moving it back to raw material, you should see some dollar reduction there. Whether they want to call that savings or not, I can't answer that. Your cost of goods might be going down because you're not building things up and letting it sit. They might see some savings there. But it's up to management to define how they want to measure that. And I think every company does it a little bit differently. So I don't think I could tell you one way or the other than to look at work in process, look at raw material inventory levels, look for the reduction, look for maybe customer service improvement or not, and look at cost of goods reduction. I don't think
one of the slides you were covering a couple back looked like we were getting there with some words like reducing different things like shortages, right? And inventory losses because you can't find parts and things like that. I wasn't sure if there was a way, if you had good examples of how we could put some money to some of those pieces that have been identified with having buffer inventory.
I don't know of any one way to tell you to measure something. Like I said, my experience has been that different companies measure things differently, and it's up to the company to decide what they want to do. I would suggest you develop your own measurements, present it to management, see if they agree, and get finance to agree. So
Okay,
if you see,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kevin. I just had a question related to that. So thank you for the presentation. The thing I was thinking about is fundamentally is the trade-off then with buffer inventory, the difference between holding cost and then the cost of having something out of stock, the cost that that would have to the organization, whether it's lost sales, lost productions, or low responsiveness. Is that the fundamental sort of underlying issue with justifying the amount of buffer stock that's held?
For some companies, that would be a correct answer. For others, it's not, because they're more concerned about having inventory available, especially if you're make to order, assemble to order, or even make to stock for that matter. If the order comes in, that you could react to it immediately. So you can't make everything strategic. You can't make everything a buffer. And what's happening today, your forecasts are out the window for certain products. You just don't know what's going to get hot, when it's going to get hot. And what becomes in demand today may disappear tomorrow. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to plan for some of that.
Thank you.
Hank, you had a comment here. An awful lot of inventory is caused by the desire to keep resources busy, and full absorption accounting shows materials and overhead as an asset until it's sold. Balance sheet profit, but not cash.
Yeah, unfortunately, an awful lot of the individual managers or especially shop floor people are expected to be busy all the time. If they're busy all the time, it means they're creating something. In the process of creating something, they're using materials, but that materials have added to them all kinds of overhead so that they have utilized their resource, which tends to be a management objective, because it certainly helps to make the acquisition of, say, machinery if you haven't been using it, it's not justified. And if you do use it, then the cost of it is added to the cost of the materials and it's shown on the balance sheet as an asset until you finally sell it. You can have an awful lot of inventory wrapped up in, or dollars wrapped up in inventory as an asset to help you support this idea of making, but you're not making cash.
No.
You don't get cash until the item is ultimately sold. And then it shows as cost of goods sold.
Yeah, because you're showing that the labor and overhead has been absorbed,
Right.
right? But until you generate cash, it's just a paper profit.
Yeah, you only generate cash when you actually sell something to somebody outside your organization. And by the way, there's a pile of software products out there that when you transfer something from one part of your organization to another, they call it a sale, be a transfer.
If you look at car companies, they used to continue to build cars even if there was no market for them, and they would get 120 days of cars sitting in their lot because they had to keep that factory running 24/7 so they could absorb all that overhead. So financially, they were showing a profit because of the overhead, but they had no cash coming in.
Exactly. Not a
Cash
good
is king.
Well, it really means an organization has to pay attention to two things: making money and cash flow.
Yeah. Feel free, folks, to ask Howard any question, but we got him here. Don't have to be bashful.
But if you have a question, drop me an email.